Imagine a vibrant discussion between people that includes both openness and critical thought in the pursuit of truth. The Purchasing Truth podcast is an experience, a journey, an exploration of the impact that negative messages in politics and the media have on our families, community, society, and nation. Join your hosts, Bill Stierle and Tom Hazard, to discover new concepts and language strategies that will reveal effective ways of establishing truth. This podcast series will tackle current events, leadership challenges, healthcare confusion, integrity in business, and many other areas that affect us all. Gain clarity and understanding of the various truth perspectives. Welcome to Purchasing Truth.
Welcome back to Purchasing Truth. I'm Tom Hazard, along with your host Bill Stierle. And you know, Bill, I'm really excited for this episode that we've planned today to share with our listeners. We're going to talk about truth and the demand for eyeballs. And I want to just set this up for everybody. There's three sort of different sort of stages of this episode where we're going to actually do a little bit of a follow-up because there's been quite some developments in the whole Smartmatic and Dominion voting systems demand for retraction. That is a great example of this. And then we've got something actually very lighthearted and humorous, although it's also it's almost as amusing how true it is as it is, you know, a little bit of comic relief in a Saturday Night Live skit that really ties into this, and also a bit into what you and I have talked about in the past about team sports, you know, and support for your team, and how that, you know, is really playing out not only in this skit in a literal way, but also how it's poking fun at our politics that is very much like team sports that you and I have talked about. And the last thing is we're going to talk, you know, highlight a recent rally in the election runoff race taking place in Georgia, Republican sure. Rally, and you know, how something that the candidate Kelly Loeffner was faced with that isn't still more example of the subject today about the demand for eyeballs and demand of your constituents, and then, you know, what she maybe did and could have done better. So anyway, sorry to take such a long time to set that up for everybody, but I just want you to know, hey, there's three little segments here that are going to tie together and make a lot of sense.
So communication, you know, coming back to the communication piece, which is kind of essential on our pursuit of truth, is really about how do we communicate truth, even though we cannot control the things that people say and do. So we can influence the things that people say and do. And the way things are mostly influenced in a capitalistic society is the things that get bought are the things that are valued. So what happens is that if you don't want to see something, stop buying it. But what happens if you don't want to see something and there's a whole bunch of other people that keep buying something you don't want to see? Then all of a sudden you're going like, I don't want to see this because it doesn't meet my need for truth. And it's causing outrage inside me. And the other person's going like, wait a minute, I do want to see that. Because isn't that true? I'm not really sure if that's true. So there's a doubt and uncertainty because what they're being offered is caught that person's eyeballs. And they want to believe wholeheartedly in their version of truth, wholeheartedly. And, you know, like you were doing the setup, Tom, I mean, there are people there, you know, like, there's, you know, the Jets are the best football team right now. No, they're a one-win team at the moment, you know. So that, you know, I mean, but for a fan, for somebody that is so interested in that, I mean, that is, there are people buying Jets t-shirts and getting Jets t-shirts for Christmas, even though they're a 1-13 team right now.
Sure. All right. Well, let's not get ahead of ourselves with the Jets. We'll come back to them later, and boy, will that be fun. So hang on for that, everybody. But that team mentality, that team identity, I guess is
That's
a better
right.
way to put it,
That's
is
the word to
something
go.
that's playing out in the media on a daily basis and in our politics. And in a very recent episode, I think it was only 2 episodes ago or so, Bill, we talked about how this company Smartmatic, and also to an extent Dominion voting systems, these two companies involved in voting machines, had been being completely trashed in outlets like Fox News, Newsmax,
Right.
One America News, and they put out press releases. They sent legal letters to each of these media outlets demanding retractions, because there was a lot of information being spread or propagated by these media outlets that was not true. And you and I talked about that, and we said they're right, we agree with them, but unfortunately, sort of the horse has left the barn. Even if these media outlets issued a retraction, it's never going to repair the damage done. It's really too late. That was our statements at the time.
That's right. That's
However, surprisingly, and that's why it's worth talking about again so soon, very surprisingly, Fox News and Newsmax, at least, I'm not certain about One America News, but Fox News and Newsmax have actually been airing these rather lengthy videos and creating their own news now about the fact that there's no evidence to support what they've been saying for the past
right.
month about
Right.
these voting
Right.
systems.
Yeah.
And this is like probably the an example of an unheard of real retraction that we've never seen from certainly an outlet like Fox News. It's getting all kinds of oxygen that I certainly never thought it was going to get. How about you, Bill?
Yeah. Yeah. See, if you're trying to protect the need for integrity, then you don't want to, you don't want to show that you weren't in integrity. But if you would like to get eyeballs on both sides of the equation to jump teams back and forth, it's okay to cover that you started the conflict because you're covering how you're resolving the conflict, and you get people on both sides. And having one of the things that's really a huge dopamine fix for people is to be in the place of looking to be led by my leader identity, who I'm being loyal to, no matter what the message is. So even if your coach stinks, it's still your coach. Even if your coach makes a bad call, it's still your coach. And you go like, oh yeah, well, they just had that one bad play. Well, that one bad play just cost them the playoffs, or that one bad play. But no, I could see, boy, if it would have worked, they would have been called a genius. If it would have worked, they would have been called a genius. But it's like, but why'd you call it there? So very, very problematic, because regrettably, media, like vampires need blood, media needs eyeballs. And it's usually at the expense of the viewer's time, attention, and lifespan, is they're sucking the life out of people, because the conflict is something that I come back to. I am coming back to because this is my habit, and regrettably, news politics is a habit for many, many people, but they don't know their truth is being hijacked. So,
Well, so to me, it was very interesting, because at first when I watched this retraction, I'm like, wow, they're really must have felt threatened. This is what I first thought, that these Fox News, Newsmax must have really felt threatened or taken the legal jeopardy they might find themselves in for disparaging these voting companies seriously. That's what I at first thought. I was like, wow, I can't believe it. Because they really could have just ignored it and not given it any oxygen on their network. We're not, management says we're not issuing retraction. We're not going to give it any oxygen on the air. It'll go away. That could have happened. But I think, Bill, what you're saying here is that they don't care if they're making news of the fact that there's no evidence to support what they said in the last month. If propagating now the retraction is going to get them more eyeballs, that's what they're all about. Is that correct?
That's right. That's correct. That's what they're all about. I need more eyeballs. Now, regrettably, President Trump is the same way. He's watching the ratings. He's watching how something he says or does gets traction. So, for example, in early rallies, he used to say, drain the swamp, right? Oh, my people gave me this sentence, drain the swamp, and I didn't really, and he would told people that about the messaging. I didn't think drain the swamp would work, but look how well it works. Drain the swamp. And everybody's going, drain the swamp. They don't know that they're because it's a rally. It's the loyalty of we're with you, drain the swamp. Yes, it's the swamp. Yes, unfair media bias. It's like, but you're not looking at what the truth is about what you're doing. And you're not in integrity, and other nations are not respecting you because you cannot rally long term behind a rallying cry, because eventually the loyalty will shift away from somebody that's not in integrity or not in fairness or not in justice. It'll move away from them, and many people are experiencing that. It's going like, yeah, I'm still getting the folks on the fringe, but I am not getting the core voters that I actually need to push it across. And they're, it's like there's no one around to feed on now, because there's only this limited group, and that's not enough of them. I need more of them to get reelected. So media will take both sides of an issue, so they can, and they will say, I'm just interested in the eyeballs, and I will step into this conflict and go like, yeah, look it, they're following suit, and they'll get eyeballs with that.
And what occurred to me as I'm, watching this, and as you and I were, talking about it before recording this episode, preparing for this, is that, this is what all of the media outlets, I think rightfully so, get criticized for. CNN, MSNBC, Fox, any of them, quite honestly, for really sensationalizing things in order to get more eyeballs, right?
Yes.
And people, and people on the right side of the political spectrum call MSNBC MSDNC, and they call CNN the criminal news network. I've heard that from people on the right, and then other people on the left, of course, think that of course, for the last 4 years and beyond, have thought Fox was so out of integrity with being, in air quotes, fair and balanced, right? But in reality, they're all trying to do the same thing. This is a business of getting ratings and getting eyeballs, and integrity really takes a back seat a lot of the time.
Yes, and proportionality takes a back seat. So I was listening to Wolf Blitzer. I was in the kitchen doing stuff, and I had Wolf Blitzer on, and oh my gosh, within 15 minutes, he said breaking news 4 times with a brand new storyline. Just in, breaking news, da 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 da. I'm going like, is it really breaking news? Is it really going to make my life wonderful? Do I really need to know this, Wolf?
Oh,
Is
I
it
think
really on
it could easily just be news that happened.
news that happened? Here's the next step. They ain't gonna say that. It's breaking news. It's breaking news. What's breaking news? What's breaking? What's breaking? See, the phrase breaking news already gets a level 8 from my adrenaline cortisol system. It's like, what's breaking? What is breaking? Oh my gosh, is there something being evolved here? Is there something showing up there? And and for those that are following or get used to following this, it's really tough because truth can be boring. Truth doesn't necessarily have all the shiny stuff on it. It's like, this it's the truth is this bridge needs to be replaced or it's going to fall down. That's the truth. Repair the bridge, replace the bridge. But it's not as good as if the falls down, and it's not as good if you report it falling down, and it's not as good if if somebody just gets hurt. It might be even better if someone gets killed. I mean, we're regrettably allowing things to break more so we can cover more. I mean,
Oh yeah.
it's like, oh my gosh, can we just fix? How about why do you want to fix the criminal justice system? It creates wreckage all along the system. You want to cover the news of wreckage of people's lives and have traumatic story, and you had to spend 8 years in jail because it was unjust or it was a small arrest. And yes, it was the letter of the law, but it was not really a just or fair use of the taxpayer dollar. I'll argue that all day on a news media show because I am not interested in the truth, and I am not interested in fixing what the truth is. I am not interested in justice or proportionality. I just want to cover the trauma.
Well, oh my goodness, is that disheartening? But it's really true, isn't it? I mean, it's really media, according to the cliche, the squeaky wheel gets the grease. It's just squeaky wheel,
Squeaky.
reporting because that's what gets the attention. I really was surprised, and I'm happy to admit that I was wrong. I don't have to always be right, unlike some people in the White House. Just saying. Um, but I really thought these news outlets were not going to even consider a retraction. They weren't going to give it any oxygen because if you really look at what the message says on its face, it undercuts the credibility of the reporting each of these media outlets has done over pretty much the last month since the election.
Yeah.
And they allowed other people to come on their airwaves and just speak this the stuff that was far from truth just to serve their own purpose and their own opinion hosts. I'm talking about the Hannitys, the Tucker Carlsons, the Laura Ingrams, the Lou Dobbs of Fox, actually voiced opinion that this stuff was true about this machines flipping votes, and it
Right.
fed in to the narrative they wanted to propagate. But so, in the irony of ironies, to me, and maybe it's kind of obvious to you, Bill, I think that's what we're saying here, that undercutting their credibility of what they've said in the past month is not near as important as getting more eyeballs, because that's what this retraction is doing for them now.
That's right. That's right. They're proving that they weren't things, and then they can say, well, it was breaking news back then. We had some people we were just reporting what people were saying to us. People were saying to us it was a fraud. Well, you just reported what people said. Well, yeah, they seem like they're credible. They were on TV once, so they're credible. That doesn't make them credible. And journalism stops at just the person that has an opinion. And the answer is these days, yes, it stops at the person that has an opinion. It doesn't stop a convincing opinion. I mean, there's even documentaries that are done
Or
that where all these people with convincing opinions. It's like it's not really fully true. It's not really fully backed by science.
or
Yeah.
what's really more to the point, their opinions that feed into their viewers biases, right?
Right.
It
That's right.
confirms their biases.
That's right. That's right. It confirms the bias. And I am going to discard any person of authority because, it's not as important. It's not as important as the marketing eyeballs that I'm going to get, because that's where my ad revenue is coming from. So this is the system. Now, the question is, how do you empathize with somebody on the losing side of it? How do you communicate compassionately to somebody that gets stuck in that corner? You've got to be able to say, wow, I can see how that thing was a truth for you. I can see how that really got you fired up. I can see how there's other people that are of the opposite opinion of that, and how you're mad because there are people on the other side, and you prefer to open the economy rather than meet the need for health and protection for people. You want the financial piece because you want to protect the small business owner, but you're not as much interested in protecting the mom or the dad that could get this disease, or the person that could die from this early. You're interested in keeping the economy alive versus that. Is that what you're saying to me? See, you now that's boring news, but it's at least it's truthful. And you can still use empathy to create conflict if you'd like. It's sort of like, yeah, they're doing like this, and look at how fired they are up over there, and then turn your microphone right over and say, this group is really fired up about it this way. And then come back to the center and say, what would best serve the nation? See, it's like turning us into a United States again, instead of state versus state, which is what the identity politics has turned is. Texas is challenging 4 other states' elections. It's like, wait a minute, wait a minute. Let's see if we can get 4 other states to challenge Texas elections. Let's take California, New York, and uh, you know
Massachusetts or
Washington,
somebody, yeah, or
Massachusetts, or
whatever.
something like that. They're going to challenge voter suppression in Texas, and we're going to file a lawsuit to do that. It's like, wait a minute. Texas is going to, well, we don't want you to mess with us. It's like, why are you trying to mess with others?
Right. Well, and so interesting. So state by state, Bill, really brings us back to a bit of the local identity and the team identity to an extent. And now that's probably a good segue into what I think everyone, all of our listeners, should really enjoy this next sort of segment of the show, which is and we've got a link to this video in the blog post at purgingtruth.com. And believe me, everyone, you're all going to want to go check it out. So, Saturday Night Live did a skit recently where it was all about team sports, literally the Jets. And the Jets this season, of course, have been at the basement of the league. They hadn't won a game until like a week ago, and they're like 11-1 or 12-1 or something right now. It may be worse, but toward the end of the season. But it was as if it was that skit was as if they're, news reporting about the Jets and talking to, people they're interviewing about, the score or their record, and say, oh, well, you actually think the Jets are, 1 win and 11 losses? No, 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 that's not true. And they did things like, well, who was who did the scoring at that game? Who actually tabulated the score results? The NFL? You think that they know what they're doing? I mean, it was. I can't even describe it very well. It was so funny. I was like crying, laughing through the thing because, Bill, it
Yeah,
really played into what you and I have talked about many times on this show
that's right.
about how the team identity and the support for your team very much parallels support for your political,
Yeah.
candidates that you
Yeah,
may
the
be
candidate. Yeah, your
supporting.
loyalty. Yeah, the need for loyalty is so valuable for a team identity to grow. You've got to be loyal to the team. So one part of the skit that still cracks me up is that, well, in the first quarter, they were up 3-0. And therefore, then all of these other points came in from who knows where. It's like the game wasn't over yet. The election, the time wasn't done yet. The votes weren't fully counted. But wait a minute, in the first quarter, it was 3-0. And clearly the Jets won because look at all these votes that came in the first quarter. And it was a little sad and maddening. But I mean, it's a great way the comedy looks at this thing at the same time to pursue truth when the president makes the claim that, but look at all the votes that I had before 3 a.m. and where did all these votes come in? It's sort of like that's the way the voting thing works, is that the real-time votes, the people that vote in person, are the ones that give you the numbers. And then the other votes, the mail-in votes that take a little while, because they made them counted on the same day, because if they made them counted ahead of time, the numbers would have never been in favor, or would have been a lot closer all the way through, through the counting, through the evening. Well, this is what happened, but they didn't allow them to count them early. They waited for the day of. They go, no, we want to not count them. We're going to count them the day of. It's like, what do you mean? We got them sitting over here. We can count them. They're all votes.
Yeah, isn't that amazing, Bill, that had every state allowed their votes to be counted before election day, to be tabulated but not released?
That's right.
There never would have been this narrative or this appearance that Trump was leading by a large margin in a lot of states. It would have been, look, Biden's ahead in all these states. It would have been overwhelming, and a lot more people would have been convinced on November 3rd that he won the election. And so, yeah, you're right. That is one of the best parts of this SNL skit, where they're saying, yeah, look at the first quarter. The Jets clearly won this game. I don't know what happened after that, where all these mysterious points came from, in these later on. But, and while it's humorous, it is truly funny. I don't care who your sports team favorites are, or your political, leanings, ideology, whatever, the people you wanted. You look at this, it's funny. But what's really kind of sad in some ways is that this skit is illuminating probably the truth of the reality as an analogy of the bias, and how, I guess they were just scoring all the results. They were just tabulating all the results. It's just the game wasn't over on election day.
The game was not over. The game's over when the game's over when the percentages are in, the tally is in, the votes have counted, when it's been certified, when it has been certified here, and they keep thinking that the game is going in the other direction. Well, we can stop it at Congress, the people in Congress, but there's not even enough votes there, and to be able to stop the certification. And it's like, what are you going to do between here and there? And what are you? Yeah,
you're so right, Bill. You're so right, because actually what's being reported currently about, so at this point, as we're recording this, not only did all the states certify their votes, the Electoral College has voted. The Electoral College vote came down exactly how it was expected to, based on the, what had been reported about the states, votes. And on January 6th, 2021, I believe it is, the Congress meets to officially certify the votes. And ironically, Mike Pence, as the leader of the Senate, being vice president, is the person that's going to have to sort of bless, if you will, or finally, certify the election for Joe Biden and Kamala Harris. But there are senators and congresspeople, on the right that are talking about, challenging this certification of vote on January 6th.
Right.
And the reality is they don't have enough votes to stop it, to prevent
Right.
it from happening. But Mitch McConnell and the leadership of, both in the House and the Senate, who have come out now and said, we need to embrace, Joe Biden as president-elect, move
That's right.
on for the good of the country, all this sort of stuff. They don't want to have a vote, which is what might be forced upon them, to have all
Right.
these Republican senators go on record voting against Trump on that day. And if enough senators make noise about this, they have the ability to force the Republican leadership to have more of a prominent and notable vote where they all have to go on record in order to
Right.
carry out their constitutional duty, and they're trying to avoid that. So that's a very interesting thing that's going to play out here.
I feel disheartened as I hear you say that, because they all have been on record with the impeachment. They were all on record. Um, they voted on party lines, and there is a Georgia vote that's coming up with the two senators coming up, which is another part that's in the play here. Um, the amount of pain and suffering between here, the when we're recording this, and when January 20th shows up, um, is extraordinary. The I'm just slowing down to get a hold of how difficult it's going to be and how much work it's going to take to restore trust, collaboration, cooperation. When there's so much money in the mix, when there's so many, when loyalty has been stoked so hard, um, it's going to be very, very difficult to see really what the next 8 to 12 years are going to look like in our lifetime, because because now all of a sudden we're in the fight to restore and get enough propaganda around truth. I know this is a weirdest sentence to say, but it's almost like truth has to be sold in such a way that if you're not being truthful, there's got to be a heavy consequence for it, because right now there's not a heavy consequence. I mean, you can vote on an impeachment thing, or wait a minute, just Lindsey Graham. Lindsey Graham can say, whatever, 8 years ago, if this same thing happens, I will not take the vote. And then he does this exactly opposite and paid no political price for it. He did not get a vote. If there was one way to vote him out, it's like the guy's got no integrity. He said one thing over here, and he's saying this over here, and the state of South Carolina picked loyalty to Lindsey over integrity, truth, and respect. That's what they picked. They said, we're going with loyalty. Lindsey's loyal to the president. Lindsey loyal, and there's enough of us in this state to have him elected. So the cost for lying is not as expensive. Um, and the cost for truth is not as valuable. So it's a little unsettling, because we know what the markers for the game is, and you can't even speak up for truth and get any points for being truth against loyalty. It's like that is something we have not seen for the longest time. It's like, yeah, it's the need for truth is not, a prize. The
Uh,
the and it's very, very unsettling, because media is smiling all the way, because they're able to collect eyeballs on both sides, and they don't really care about truth now, because truth isn't paying. Let me say it this way: if truth had greater value, then the eyeballs would follow it. Nope. Sensationalism. Sensationalism and loyalty bias is the one that's winning over truth. And there's a way out. I mean, when we can, if when we there's a way out, there's a way to empathize with it and try to move past it. But it's very, very hard. And regrettably, there's not enough skilled people in media to language their way through it, and there's not enough skilled people in in politics to be able to language. They don't know what to say when somebody's blatantly lying at them anymore. They don't know what they say. So
That is you're right, quite unsettling, Bill.
it is.
Well, so let's pivot to our third section for today, which you alluded to a minute ago. In we have this election in Georgia that is
Right.
still going on. That is obviously the control of the Senate hangs in the balance of that election. Now there were dueling rallies just the other day. There
Yes.
was one with Kamala Harris for the Democrats. There was one Ivanka Trump, really organized, or she was, I guess, sort of the purported
Draw.
organizer. That was for both Purdue and Loeffler. And Kelly Loeffler on the podium on the stage talking to this rally crowd as she took the stage, something really notable happened, and it was recorded, and we have a link to a video of that also on the blog post today at purchasingtruth.com for this episode about eyeballs. And Kelly Loeffler took the stage, and she's trying to start speaking to communicate her message, whatever that message was. And I say that because we don't know what her message was. She wasn't able to really give her message, because as she took the stage, the crowd, I almost want to say the mob, not in terms of organized crime, but mob
Crowd of
mentality,
people.
the crowd, right? The crowd was just chanting, "Fight for Trump, fight for Trump," over and over. And she can't even get a word in edgewise. And she says, "Yep, you're right. You're right." And she's holding up, her number one finger. "You're right. You're right." So trying to get the crowd to just calm down. Right. And then, she finally thinks that she's going to be able to start speaking. And then they stop yelling, "Stop the steal, stop the steal." It's remarkable that she had no skill to control the
Nope.
crowd, to give them any empathy or recognition, and then be able to say something about her. This example here really shows that the crowd was more interested in fighting for Trump in an election he's already lost than they were in really what they should be focused on, is these candidates and making sure they elect them so that the Democrats don't get control of the Senate. Yeah, it was remarkable. So I really think everybody, you want to go check out that video if you haven't seen it already. But
Right.
Bill, I'm curious, if you were advising Kelly Loeffler, is there anything she could have done better to sort of, I don't want to say purchase truth back, but purchase the crowd back, to get control of
Yeah.
her own rally?
To get control of her own rally, to be able to speak to what was going on there. She would have, if she would have hung around two words, she would have she would have been safe and would have got control of the crowd. If she would have hung around at first, she needed to hang around justice and fairness. So, for example, when they're yelling "Stop the steal," she could say, "I'm hearing your anger. I hear that you want justice. I hear that you want fairness, and the president wants fairness and justice the way he sees it too." And they would go, "Yes," and they would stop chanting, because the "Stop the steal" was, you need to hear that we're angry because we've been sold on justice and fairness. They haven't been sold on truth, but they've been sold on justice and fairness. How do we know they haven't been sold on truth? Because they recounted the votes 3 times in the state by hand. It's like, you already recounted this 3 times. We've looked at the scoreboard. But if Kelly assigns justice and fairness to the way the president sees it, that satisfies loyalty. Whether or not she could do anything about it, or if she does anything when she gets there, elect me first and take your best bet. All of the people at her rally are already voting for her. She's got to worry about what she is. She's got to worry about the ones that are watching this video. She doesn't have to worry about the chanters. She's got to worry about, how does this look in media?
Well, in reality, is the way it looks is she is catering to the most radical fringe of her
Right.
party.
Right.
That's not going to help her in the middle.
That doesn't help her in the middle. Doesn't help her in the middle. So they say stop the steal, and you got people in the middle going like, we've counted this 3 times. What, like, by now, many people in the middle's logical mind has came online. They're going like, yeah. Georgia's already certified their election. It's like, we've lost the game here. The people in the middle are back to the rational place. But as she leaned into them, she didn't need their vote. She already has their vote. Those are all fans. She's just got to like hear them and then look more rational than they do, which
Kind of
she did.
hard to do for her in that moment. She didn't succeed at that.
Didn't succeed. No, she looked like she couldn't communicate over. She couldn't lead that group. I hear you feel angry. I hear you want me to fight for justice and fairness the way the president sees it. The president has been a fighter from the very beginning. I'll fight for you too. Yay! Now she's got a shot
Right.
at not looking at, and then when she turns around, or she's the low one on the total poll later, she says like, no, those other people, I was just one of the votes. That's the way it works too. Then they say fight for Trump. That's
right.
the need for being heard. You would like me to hear how furious you feel. If she puts the word furious in that crowd, they'll start to calm down. I hear you feel furious, and you really would like me to hear how important it is for making sure that every vote counts. And in Georgia, we count every vote. That's what we do. So get out there and vote to make sure your vote is counted. Notice I avoided the whole thing.
Well, and in fact, if she did that, she could help them realize, oh my gosh, not enough of us, not enough of our team voted in the last election. That created this result. Therefore, we need everyone to get out and vote.
Right. Instead, all she did was get pelted by slogans and sentences. See, branding branding overshadows truth, because is Tide really the best soap on the shelf? I don't know if it's true or not. I just know that Tide was the first soap example that came into my head, and that was the brand that showed up. Is it better than OxyClean? I don't know what the truth is. They've done such a good job of branding that Tide is plastered on my brain. And when I'm looking to purchase things, then is it a price point? Is it a color of the jug? Is it the number, the way they do numbers of loads inside this thing and causing wacky math to show up in my head? I'm going like, I'm not calculating how much this money is versus how many loads this does. You're making me think here. And that's the whole point of branding, is that if a confused mind wants to go to the habit, it doesn't want to rethink a branding decision. People don't want to rethink Trump. They're already loyal to Trump. They're already loyal to the Republican cell for the last 30 years. Since Reagan has been selling government is bad, that group of people have been buying the phrase government is bad. Therefore, starve the beast. We're not going to spend money on the government. We're not going to help people in this way. We're not going to do XYZ, XYZ, and try to bring our society up. We're not doing it. So the dismantling of the Great Society, taxing the rich, buying all the social programs, getting our society to have a middle class, which turned into affluence in the 80s, 90s, and early 2000s. Even with the crashes that went there, we did pretty good as economies. But now all of a sudden we're sucking air because there's a belief that government is bad. Meanwhile, government is the foundation of the floor that capitalism sits on, and people don't get that. That's what it does. That's the foundation. It's the floor that it sits on. This is the house. The foundation is the government, and the house is what capitalism is on top of it. How difficult is that concept? They don't get that. Oh no, that foundation's bad. Maybe we should not fix the foundation. It's like, it's cracking.
Well, again, now we're back to the squeaky wheel, right?
Right. That's true. And I feel disheartened that, like a lot of politicians don't have communication skills, the ability to empathize on the fly, to be able to be present to the questions being asked. And yeah, they can have a point of view about, what the tax rate is, for rich people and stuff, or how many social programs that you want to do or you want the government to do, or how to create a path that's really going to help America's the rebuilding of the middle class, which is really kind of like the next thing that's up for us. Is that if our kids are really up to it, they got to really fight for. We need to rebuild this middle class, which is there's everything from unions that can come back to other forms of things, because the independent, the unloyal worker is then it's always the talented person is going to get the most money, and all they got to do is shop, and businesses are going to suck air because of it, and that affects the stability again. We've got to work on our fixing our stability and infrastructure, as if this is not a mystery. But and that's I think that kind of leads us into where are we going with truth now? Where are we going in? And watch what happens is that as Biden and Kamala Harris comes in, watch the smallest little mistake they make. The smallest mistakes get amplified to level 10, because there's not a sacredness around truth. We really got to restore a sacredness, a high value around truth. If somebody's speaking truth, then that gets more points than 10 messages of false or points of view or smaller versions of truth. And I feel a little, I don't know how our society is going to get off the crack cocaine of this media blitz. I'm not sure how we're going to break the news addiction, because it doesn't look like it's changing soon. So
Yeah, the demand for eyeballs is actually being fueled. It's there's two ways to look at it. There's a demand for information, and these media outlets want to supply it. It's their business, right?
right.
And people just they I mean, it's the old cliche that the train wreck gets a lot more attention than, wow, that train moved through smoothly and efficiently through town, I hardly even noticed it. Right.
That's right. Oh, right. What, there was something that went by me. It's like, yeah, it was like, like just you were sitting there watching it, right? It's like, but it very, very unsettling. So we
Mm.
do need to do a little bit of work And that's the growth of integrity, the growth of mutual respect, the growth of being able to engage. What need are we really going to get met as a nation? What do we want the USA to look like in 20 years? And that's what we're up to next. So,
all right. Well, Bill, I really enjoyed this episode, and I want to remind everybody, please go to the blog post at purchasingtruth.com. Check out that SNL skit video. You're gonna really enjoy it just on its
Very
face. But then, hopefully you'll see what we saw in it, that art imitating life may be revealing more truth about it than than we realize.
Yeah,
and
true.
of course, the other videos and references that are there. So thanks, everybody.
Yeah, thanks, everybody.
Thank you for listening to this Purchasing Truth podcast. We trust that you have enjoyed this engaging and thought-provoking conversation. Our hope is that you've received value, found clarity, and broadened your truth perspective in this episode. If you did, leave us a review or visit our website, purchasingtruth.com. Join us again for another informative and content-rich discussion here at the Purchasing Truth podcast. Don't just accept whatever information comes your way. Join the discussion. Discover your own voice. Purchase your own truth.